it's over. I'm sad. I'm so sad. It's the last day. Yes, it's the last of it all. Why does it have to end? I'm not ready for it to end. DAW, what memories. What memories. So many good memories. I remember a while back when I was young and I was involved in DAW. And as I looked back to Deaf Awareness Week and think about this being the last day, I'm really sad. Why does it have to end? Yes, why can't it keep on? You have no experience with Deaf Awareness Week. I am tragically sad.
Uh,
Hi. Hi, Danny. How are you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Oh, so many memories, so many memories. I'm trying to think of other. Oh, look, see, I'm seeing pictures of my memories. We're waiting for other people. Here, look, these people are here. Oh, okay. Hi, hello. Hi, everybody. Hi. We're waiting for some more people. Oh, hi. Oh, hi. Wow, thank you all for coming to this event. Thank you so much. Are you ready? First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Crystal Rios Harris. Crystal Rios Harris. I have a name sign that represents me. It's a K from the American Sign Language alphabet. I work at Deaf and Hearing Services Center, and I'm at Salinas in the Salinas Center. I'll introduce someone else if I may, Joshua. Hi, hello everyone. I'm Joshua Blanco. I have a name sign. It's the letter J on my right-hand lip. I'm an ASL teacher in the LEAD program, and I teach the ASL class at DHHSC in Fresno, California, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services Center. I'm deaf myself. Crystal, back to you. Thank you, Joshua. I'd like to introduce our panel. Danielle. Hi, I'm Danny Duran. I also have a name, so I'm an actor, I'm an actor, more a dancer. And I'm from California, Southern California, Los Angeles to be exact. LA, go LA. Hi. Thank you, Danny. Beautiful name. I have another person here, Everett, that I'd like to introduce you to. Hello, my name is Everett. My name sign is the letter E from the American Sign Language alphabet on my temple, and I live in San Jose. I grew up really close by in Santa Cruz, and I'm very happy to be here. Next. Thank you, Everett. We have someone else by the name of Sarah. Hello, my name is Sarah Young Bear Brown. And my name sign is a combination of the letter S on my shoulder to the sign for Brown. And I flew in from Iowa just now, and I'm very honored to be here. I'm an advocate and activist involved in a number of organizations, and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much for being here today. Now, Christopher, hi, my name is Christopher Smith. My name sign looks like I'm writing on my hand with the letter C in the American Sign Language alphabet. And I'm from Santa Cruz. I'm deaf. I'm gay, queer. Thank you. And my name is Christopher. Thank you, Christopher, for being with us today. Well, we've had our introductions and we have an interpreter to interpret from ASL to English for all of you who are here. Before I start asking questions, I want to let the audience know that if you have any questions, please type them in chat or in the notes under the, so that the team can inform us from YouTube. That's for later, just to let you know. Okay, we're ready to ask you your questions if you're ready for us. And there's a resounding yes from the panel. I want to ask you about your background, your identity, and what do you do for a living? Are you freelance, part-time, full-time? So I'd like to start with Everett, if I may. Well, I did not expect to be first, but I'm happy to tell you a little about myself. I was born deaf, and I identify myself as deaf culture. I grew up signing American Sign Language, but with some modifications. My entire family was hearing, non-deaf. And so I first learned C sign, signing exact English. So later I learned ASL and realized it was my own language, and I learned that in school. My work is, I'm a full-time professor at San Jose State University. I've been there since 2016, teaching ASL and deaf culture. I genuinely enjoy teaching. Thank you. Back to you. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Everett. What about you, Danny? My background is that I was born deaf, and I have an interesting story. I won't tell the whole long thing, but I was born hearing for a very brief time. I was hearing, and then I was sick from heart. I lost my hearing because of heart surgery. I'm Latino. I'm a Latinx person of family, a background of Latinx. So I call myself a Latina. As far as my work life, I've been a dancer for 20 years. And that's on and off in terms of work, but I'll answer more in the next question. I'm an ASL teacher in the world of education, and I've been doing that for 9 years. I'll explain more about why I do these things. I enjoy doing full, part-time, whatever comes my way, and that changes regularly. You know how we have a variety of things where we share cultures, and I have enjoyed that very much in terms of the cultural sharing that goes on between myself, my culture and other cultures. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. Sarah, would you like to share your story next? I have a number of hats that I wear. I'll start off with, I was born deaf, and I identify as a Native American of the Miwok tribe. That's a tribe in Iowa. I'm very involved in culture. I'm interested in the old ways, and I still follow many of those old ways. Now I'm a mother to two children, a son who is 6 and a daughter who is 4. My son is hearing, my daughter is deaf. A coda he has deaf parents, of course. I'm full-time mother. I'm a homeschool teacher because of COVID. I'm not sending my kids to school during COVID. And I'm also the director for our people in Iowa. I'm involved with deaf poverty, the people who work against deaf poverty. And I've started a group called Gathering of Deafavia. This is for the Native American community and my tribe in particular, for allies, people who are learning more about, interested in learning more about my culture and so forth. I've had that going for 5 years. I was the founder of that. I think that's probably enough, and I better let other people talk about their perspectives. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. Wow, a mother and so much more. Christopher. I have to modify the picture so that I can see. I hate tech issues, but anyway, hello. I am Christopher Smith. And as I said, my name is signed with a C down my other hand from the American Sign Language alphabet. I'm very, very identified as deaf. But interestingly, I grew up with an unclear identity. I had difficulty finding my identity until I learned about deaf culture and that kind of thing. And that might have been in my late 40s, but after that, late 30s, but after that, I got that. Over 35 years, I've been a performer. Before, I've been a student, a professional student until I was 45, but then I had MS. And so my dancing, the interpreter might have mistaken that, choreographer. So then dancing had to stop because I had MS. So with MS, I've been doing one-man shows. And that's the earrings, but I'll tell you more about that later. Thank you so much. I don't want to jump ahead. Thank you, Christopher. The next question is, how did you become who you are today? And I'd like to start with Danny. You said you're a dancer. How did you become a dancer? You say you've done that for 20 years. Would you mind telling us more about that? I'd be happy to. Sure. I have a lot to say, but I'll try to make it brief. I told you that I was born with a heart disease and heart surgery, and I went to the hospital many, many times. So I missed a lot in childhood. And you know how other people love candy and things like that? I never thought about candy. My second home was the hospital. That's what I remember. But I was sick and I'd be sick so often. And then I saw Michael Jackson and it changed my life. I love him. You know why? I watched him. At that time, the doctor said I should be moving. I shouldn't lie about. It wasn't good for my health. And I was on so much medication and so forth that I wasn't motivated. But Michael Jackson inspired me. Remember how he walked backwards and did the moonwalk and all that stuff? I got so excited, and I found out my mother was a dancer too. She was more like a cheerleader, and she supported me to deal with rhythm, because as a deaf person, I couldn't tell what the song's rhythm was. And then she would help me understand what the story of the song was and the rhythm. She would show me it with her hands like you're seeing me do right now. And that would help me to understand the rhythm and the strength of the music. And then it became my own. And I fell into that so thoroughly. I did do some internships. I wanted to be a dancer. I loved dancing. I met an administrator in a ballet for the deaf agency, and that's how I got in, a modeling agency, excuse me. And then I saw that modeling and dance is not easy. Dance is very, very challenging. So I wouldn't sign because people were watching, I had to be subtle. I felt like I couldn't show I was deaf. That sucks, but I wanted to show I could dance. So I was doing all the signing a little bit subtly, but now I'm bringing sign back. So people let me in. I was able to make it. I even got to meet famous people like J-Lo and Pitbull. I didn't even know who that was, Pitbull. And I was talking to my sister and she said, "What? Oh my God." She started crying. "You're so lucky. It's not fair." I thought, well, all right. Point is, in my internship, I met so many people and it was very challenging. And people kept saying, "How are you going to hear the music?" And then I'd have to explain one after the other. I would have to explain the same thing, that I had the skill, that I had the capability, and then they opened their minds. But they could not even imagine. But my manager fought for me as well. But I had to fight constantly for 2 years, up and down and up and down. But I feel good because of the outcome. Here we go. Wow. Good to know about your experience and your energy and your motivation to become a dancer. That's great. Let me move on to Christopher. Let me see, how shall I start? I'm a performer. I was a performer for 35 years. Before that, I was a professional dancer. And the way I did that, I went to the School of Performing Arts for training. I was the only deaf person there. I had interpreters, but during the training in Performing Arts High School, all the hearing students were very competitive, very, very technically accurate and competitive. I had training, but in my time, the students weren't friendly nor supportive. They were uppity and difficult with me. And then I tried very hard to maintain and to do what I could, but the interpreter was a little bit unconcerned, uninvolved, and left me on my own. So I had to do it on my own. I had to fight and struggle. But then I became a performer. I danced. And then when the MS hit at the age of 45, at that point in my life, I thought my life is finished. Dance is finished. It's gone for me. So I didn't know what to do. I have MS and I thought that was it. But I ended up creating a one-man show called Lena and Me. Lena is Lena Horne, an old, beautiful, black, light-skinned star from way back. I watched her in old movies, and I was like 7, and I would get so excited watching her. She inspired me the way she performed. And from then on, I did a one-man show called Lena and Me. I hope I'm not using too much time. Let me give it back to Crystal. Thank you, Christopher. Wow. So many changes and motivation. Thank you, Christopher. Sarah. My identity grew from the time I was a little girl. I was born, I went to school for the deaf when I was 4 years old at the Iowa School for the Deaf. And when I went in there, everybody was white and it was such culture shock. I was the only Indian, Native American girl. And they said, "Are you scared?" I wouldn't let people look at me. I wouldn't let people look at me. I was scared. I was shy. And as I grew up, I had two deaf cousins, guys. I was the only girl. So I felt different. I didn't feel the same as them, even though I had some people who were more like me. I didn't have many people to look up to, my family and my tribe, but I didn't have a lot to look up. Growing up, I thought I was the only deaf Native girl in the whole world. Can you imagine that feeling of being so alone, so unusual, so unrelated, unconnected? That was my identity struggle for a long, long time. And then I did get involved in sports, but luckily my family learned to sign from the time I was a baby and taught me about culture, and I learned a great deal from them. And in the outside world at the school, I learned about the rest of the world and how different my two worlds were, my native world and my outside deaf world. I'm native Indian, native woman, deaf, so many identities. And when I thought about leaving school, I didn't know quite where to go or what to do with my life next. Sarah's screen seems to be frozen. I'm so sorry. We're having a little technical problem. So Sarah, if you're on, let's continue again. Back to Sarah. Oh, we're having some technical problems. Hello. It looks like there are some technical issues with one of our panelists. So I want to make a comment about what's been going on. Of course, the industry is a hard industry. This is on Danny's commenting on Danny. And the industry's tough, and Christopher noticed it too, and perhaps even harder on a deaf person. The challenges are significant for all of us. Thank you. I wanted to say I've really appreciated your comments so far, very, very much. They've touched me. And now let's go back to Sarah. It seems like her video is smoothed out. So let's go back to Sarah and let her continue with her story. What was the last thing I said? I can't quite remember. You were talking about how you got with your family and, okay, all right. My family was happy to learn to sign, and apparently we have a frozen screen again. Oh, and I learned more about my my native culture, my tribe's culture. And I picked those things up as I grew up, and I was involved in things. For example, I went to the Longhouse. Wickiup is the word for it. And I learned how to cook, but with a fire and using a big pot that we'd put in and create food for many people together. And I learned how to take care of the food and how to cut the meat. We had our own farm. We had our own animals. We had a cattle farm. And I'm sure there were a lot of different things I would mention. But now, in terms of my deaf identity, I learned about the deaf community from people in the, I never did have access to the deaf community. And so to learn more about the truth of the history, I made vlogs to talk about the history as I learned about it, to educate the world about and the deaf community about me. Maybe 10 years ago before I had kids, that's when I started doing vlogs. I've done that. I've established groups. I've been involved in different activities.
Mhm.
I have a lot of identities, I'll tell you that, but I'm still growing. I'm still young. So I still have a long way to go, and I look forward to what the future has in store.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yay. Oh, thank you, Sarah, for your activity, for your advocacy, for your activism. Thank you. And last, Everett. I'm a full-time teacher. How I got to this place? Well, a while back, I grew up deaf, and my entire experience was related to being deaf. Even with that experience, I had struggles with my identity because I was the only deaf person in my entirely hearing family, my non-deaf family. Luckily, my mother decided to learn ASL quickly. Truth be told, it wasn't ASL, it was signed English, signing exact English called C. But that decision had a huge impact on my upbringing because my parents never experienced ever deafness in their family or friends. I was the first deaf human being in their life when they had me. I feel for them that they were willing to change their perspective because the medical perspective is cochlear implant, make them speak, make them read lips. But my parents listened to that and then did some self-analysis in terms of what might best suit their deaf child. I don't agree with my parents on a lot of things, of course, but the one thing that they decided to do impacted and changed my life so that it was completely different as opposed to if they hadn't made that decision, was that we signed. Now this development of my life has been a struggle. I've been involved with hearing people more than deaf people in many cases. And I feel like if I were hearing, I would have a better life. That's what I thought. Until I went into a school for the deaf in kindergarten in Kansas. Well, the hands was difficult. I'm not sure where that school for the deaf was, the interpreters say. But I was astonished at the school for the deaf when I went in, and everyone was signing. All their hands were going like crazy, and I was fascinated. And then I went back to a school where I was one or few students. And then I went to the school for the deaf in Fremont, and I went into that school in the 4th grade, and oh my gosh, I did get homesick. So then I went back to school near my home. And in that school, it was mainstreamed, which means there were few deaf students in a hearing school. But you know what? My heart was tied to the deaf world, and ASL was a part of me, a permanent part of me. So I studied and learned ASL. I didn't expect to become a teacher of sign language. I mean, I just needed to learn how to sign. I was picturing myself differently, or at least not like that. I had a lot of different ideas for my future, like home construction with my dad. That's our family business. I thought maybe I'd get involved in the family biz and renovations and things. Or maybe a truck driver, because my dad was a truck driver too. I had a lot of ideas of what to do, but I'd never thought about being a teacher. And then in college, when I went into college, one of the ASL teachers said, "You want to be my aide? You want to be a teacher's aide in my class and see how that goes? We need deaf people to do that." I was touched because that was a hearing ASL teacher, but the ASL teacher believed in the importance of involving deaf people. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And I noticed I really, really enjoyed it. And it felt easy. I thought it would take a lot of patience, but that comes to me naturally. This came to me naturally. And I made so many wonderful connections,
Mhm.
and it changed my perspective so that I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And in 2013, at a high school, there was a vacancy. It was one of the hardest experiences. I was there for 3 years and it was tough, but it gave me a great foundation. And it gave me experience to enter San Jose State University. And I've been here since 2016. Love the work, love to work with the students. I love sharing language and culture, the culture of deaf people. But what's really important is we have to keep on hanging out with deaf people and socializing with deaf people. But I want them to do that, but I also want them to have this tool because maybe they'll meet another deaf person and they will have the opportunity to have a few, maybe just one sign to connect with that deaf person. I'm trying to have them feel comfortable rather than just ignore deaf people and think it's that deaf people aren't important enough to connect to relate to. I've been saying it's the opposite. Both people should make effort to connect. So that has been the history of my involvement, and that's how I'm here. Wow. Thank you so much for your description of becoming an ASL teacher and you found your true passion.
Sure, sure.
I'd like to ask Joshua to continue with the questions. Thank you, Crystal. Wow. A lot of things that you all have gone through and your backgrounds are different and the impact of your youth and life, very interesting for all of us. Very interesting to know about you each. The next question is about COVID-19 specifically. How has COVID-19 affected your everyday life? And how are you coping with it and moving forward in your life? Let's start with Sarah. My family's here. Yes, COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact on us. For example, I won't put my kids in school. I'd rather keep them home so I can homeschool them. That's a big difference. I'm learning a lot. I'm still working. It's a work in progress, shall I say. And, figuring out the timing for it and bedtime, the whole schedule is a steep learning curve for us. Luckily, my kids are still young, 6 and 4, so I'm not worried about the advanced courses, math and English and so forth. I feel lucky to have some, simple topics. I did teach online for beadwork. I'm a beader, and I've taught that online. We do a lot stay-at-home activities. We can't go places, right? So we have to stay home. And COVID has had a tremendous impact on our people all over the United States because of our health issues. It's been so severe. For example, in the Navajo tribe, they've been sorely hit because they have no water access on their reservation. There's no water installation. So they've been working so hard to get bottled water and struggling with that. It's been bad. That's why washing their hands and so forth has been a challenge because they need to get water on. You think of our lives, how simple it is for us. Turn on the tap, turn on the shower. They have to use bottled water for all of those things. Our people are struggling with COVID pretty seriously. My partner's tribe is Chautauqua in Mississippi. It's one of the badly hit tribes as well. In Mississippi, many of the people have been dying, and most of them are older people because our people have diabetes and heart disease and many other kinds of health issues in higher percentages than any other race. So we really want to educate people to deal with COVID and and educate people about the impact of COVID on our people both. It's very, very challenging. Wow, of course. The Native American community has been heavily impacted. Thank you. Everett? The same, what Sarah spoke about, I would agree. It's impacted us in so many ways. COVID has affected most severely what? Our socialization, right? So much less time to social space together. I get my charge that way. You know, I fill my batteries by hanging out, and then I can focus on work. But my social life has been taken away from me. And not only that, but I've noticed that my friends and students and many, many people out there are getting lower and lower depressed. I try really hard to think positive, of course, because my family has strong depression genetically. So I try very hard to stay positive, and I'm not afraid to ask for help. And I encourage others not to be afraid of that. And I'm not afraid of it. But oh man, do I sympathize, empathize, because the impact has been so heavy on mental health. And I see that everywhere, and it hurts my heart. I feel that's one of the biggest impacts on me. It's not easy teaching on Zoom. It's not easy. I know some of my peers are ready to give up teaching. They just want to change careers because Zoom is just not the same as in person. And I've been like, yeah, but mental health issues and so forth, that's the one I would say is the highest negative impact of COVID-19. And back to you. Thank you, Everett. Yeah. Now I'd like to move on to Christopher. Okay, I forgot to add one thing. When I was interning, during my dance period time, I think, when I was a dancer on tour, I forgot to mention, when I'm not performing, I model. I'm a nude model at San Jose University, wherever it works. I do nude modeling. And now with COVID, I'm out of a job. Even my show, I'm out of a job. So I'm limited. So I didn't know what to do with my life. Should I stay home all by myself? I'd go crazy. I'd feel claustrophobic. I'd feel like I was in a white suit. Somehow, what has helped me to get out of all this craziness is plants. I have a backyard, my backyard, and I've been gardening. I bought a greenhouse it's made out of plastic, and I started to grow things, and that makes my mind feel peaceful and relaxed. I talk to my plants, and it helped me immensely. So I don't just think about COVID. I can be distracted from the COVID worry. My plants are really tying me to life. So that's what I've been doing. My plants, I've enjoyed taking care of them when I'm not performing, when I'm not working. Plants have saved my life. Back to you, Crystal or Joshua. Ah, Joshua. Ah, thank you. Often people have talked about plants helping them feel the growth. The growth of the plant helps us. There's research about this, that they make us feel better, but we make them grow better too, based on this wonderful relationship. So thank you for your comments, Christopher. If you live alone and you have plants, you have someone there, even something there to connect with, even if you don't have someone there to connect with. So that's great. Thank you. And next, let's ask Danny's perspective. Okay, I'm a little emotional at this moment. It's not about me, but it's a little hard for me. I'm in a high risk group because of my heart. I told you that. I just have a concern with people who are talking about the hoax issue of COVID. Some people think it's no big deal. I'm young, but they don't think about other people who are serious, like me, who are serious risks. So it's hard for me to see that. So how that's affected me, I don't want it to make me negative. So I think if that's your choice and you're happy to hang out and go out, great. I focus on who I can control, and that's me. So I stick with high risk people who support each other, and we have this common need, even with people who aren't high risk, but who are supportive. And people staying isolated like this for so long is challenging, but health comes first. Other people are welcome to do what they want to do, but I'm not willing to join in. I don't let the negativity come into me either. I keep it just in my mind. I think it's their choice. I'm used to this because I've been sick all my life, but there are other people who will never understand me. But for example, you look at me and I look healthy, right? But I have issues, health issues. People are so surprised that you have, that I have a heart problem. But I do keep a positive attitude. Sometimes I get stressed, but that's the reason dance helps me to stay happy. But it's really hard to dance when I'm in my little house because there isn't much space for me to do my movement, but I'm still happy and dance anyway. My husband and family, we still dance, even on Zoom. What the heck? So now I find my way to positivity every time. It's scary, but it's important that I think of my health first and give other people the option, I suppose, to be who they are. The schedule of before COVID, it's so different now. Some days I forget the date, I forget the day, but now I've kept this to help me keep track of what's going on, what day it is, what time it is. I was late to buy the calendar, but this is very helpful. I'll show you what I mean. See, I keep everything in my calendar now to help me know. I'm trying to be real creative. How much water did I drink? I put in there, whatever, so that I don't forget, because I forget. I've become forgetful. As Christopher said, you feel like you're in a white jacket, a tight jacket. Yeah, it's just important to eat well. And I do yoga, I try to take care of drinking, and yoga has been so helpful. Finally, we have an ASL yoga class. I don't mind sharing. It's Matt, and I'm going to his workshop tomorrow. It's finally for deaf people. I've searched on Facebook, and sometimes you have to be careful not to get too involved in those social media things because they can be pretty negative. But I found a deaf person who does yoga or meditation in ASL, so I'm really happy. Sadly, a friend of mine passed because of COVID, named Dee Velasquez. So I hope you are taking it seriously, taking COVID seriously. So now I'm upset because of that and people still going out, but I don't let it get me angry. I put it to the side because I want to remain positive, and I remember my dear good friend with great love. He was like a father to me. I loved him. I love him still.
Mm.
Wow. That's a lot, of course, a lot of navigating that we go through. But I wanted to say thank you to Danny for expressing, sharing her feelings and thoughts with us. I really appreciate that. I think it's so important for Deaf Awareness Week to expose people, and our support of one another is very important at this time, especially with COVID-19. It's so important to show our concern, our care, our how much we care about one another, and to stay in touch with each other. Those of you who are in the audience, be sure to stay in touch with your loved ones and let them know, because you don't know when you'll see them again. So of course, thank you again. Crystal. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Crystal. Thank you. COVID-19 has been a tough time. Feel a little bit the same way, like I'm stuck in one place. I talk to my dog and my dog just looks at me and goes away. And I think, hello, no answer. And I'm waiting for my dog to start talking. Next question is, what's the biggest challenge you feel you have faced in the past or are still facing today? And how have you overcome that challenge? Let me start with Everett. Well, there are so many challenges being deaf in a hearing-centric world, of course. But what I thought of was facing things like constantly feeling I have to prove myself every time. When I meet somebody and they find out I was deaf, as soon as they're fine until they find out I'm deaf, and then they change their perspective and they look at me as if I'm a very different kind of a creature. So every time that happens, I have to mollify their concerns and try to get them back to normal, back to respecting me. And I've had to learn, this is not my problem. I've had to let go. And if they're willing to and want to learn and meet me in the middle, I'm happy to. If they're open to find out who I am, I'm happy to connect. But if that doesn't happen, quite honestly, the hardest thing for me is to just let go. I want to prove myself. I want to show I'm capable, and that deaf people in general are capable, no matter who people are, and that everyone is capable. And I want to show them that deaf people have a different language, different capabilities, and they're good at what they can do, and they have great contributions to society. And they also, we invest, they invest, we all invest in our world, and we all benefit from those contributions. I'd have to say that's one of the biggest lessons for me, to accept I am who I am, and how important it is to be positive about that. And this is my identity, regardless of what they think. It doesn't matter to me what anybody thinks, but whatever they think, it's not my problem. Wow, thank you. Don't give up. Go,
Hey,
go,
Sharon.
go, go. And also, Joshua, do you have something to add to this? No, well, some of you feel free to share what you feel comfortable sharing about how we can support one another. Crystal? I'm really sorry this isn't working.
That's okay.
Call me again, I'll answer my phone.
I'm in the waiting room, so I'm just waiting.
Then let's go to Danny. Hi, Everett was talking about never thinking of being a teacher. I've been through the same thing. What's interesting is throughout my life, it's been quite a journey. I went to CSUN, California State University, Northridge, to be a social worker because deaf people are very much in my heart. And it's been frustrating, even though my teachers were wonderful and they'd see interpreters could be get good grades and things like that. They would always question, how are you going to get a call? And I've explained, VP video phones. At that time, we didn't have cell phones, but I showed them on a computer. And I'd have to explain time and time again. So even though I applied and applied and applied, there was nobody available. It didn't match the experience, So there they were watching me, and I felt like they were so having such challenges because there were so many people who came in, like people who spoke Spanish, people who spoke other languages. They would have extra challenges just like I had when I was growing up. So I thought I would do social work, but then I gave up that plan and I found plan B and then plan C and then plan D. And my first job was in a warehouse. I wasn't embarrassed. With a bachelor's degree, I worked in a warehouse. I kept my thinking positive, and I kept my attitude positive, and I moved forward. I did what I could. And then at a college, they were looking for an ASL tutor. I had no goal to be an ASL teacher, but I thought I could make better money and I'd be involved in the community. It would be a job. That was my goal. So I was hoping to grow in my work in that way, in a career way. And it was a private school. So I thought, oh, okay, I would do it. And they would hire me. And they did hire me as a teacher. And I said, this said ASL tutor and you said teacher. I said, I'm not certified, blah, 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 blah. And they said, that's okay. You're experienced. You're an ASL teacher. You can be an ASL teacher. So I was quite challenged by that. And then I've been doing it now for 9 years and have enjoyed every step of the way. But inside, I'm still a social worker. In my heart, I want to help people. But even as I teach deaf people, I teach sign language, it touches my heart. When I graduated from CSUN, I didn't get a job right away. It was quite challenging to get a job. And how I ended up getting a job at the modeling and internship and dance and all that, it wasn't a stable lifestyle. I didn't make a lot of money. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes things were for free. Sometimes I earned money. It was a tough life. So I found myself facing many barriers. So if you happen to face barriers and you give up, don't do it. Don't do it. Keep striving forward, but make plans B, C, D, E, F through Z. Maybe you'll work at Walmart, Costco, or Sam's Club. That's okay. Better to find a way to work and then move into the community, get internships or things like that, and then you can make a success of your life. Don't depend on just one thing. Open your heart, open your mind, and you'll be successful. Okay, hold on. Thank you, Danny. Don't give up and stay positive. Both of those things are true. At this time, we need a 5-minute break, and we thank you very much. Talk among yourselves if you'd like. We'll be back at 4:05. Thank you very much.
Mm.
Have you had it?
Sure. Which question? Sorry, which?
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you so much, Christopher and Danny. Now I'd like to continue with our question about the challenges. So I'd like Richard to move forward with two things. Richard will tell his name, what his identity is, and challenges that he's felt in life. Okay, Richard. Hi, I'm Richard, and I also have a name sign, an R from the American Sign Language alphabet on my shoulder. Oppression has been one of the issues. Work and occupations has not been easy. In the hearing world, it's challenging for deaf people to reach the same status as hearing people. So it's like triple. The work is triple to do the same, to get to the same stage of work as a hearing person. Thank you, Richard, for joining us today. I'd like to start with Christopher. Just hold for 1 second. I want to be sure the interpreter can see me well. You asked the question about what's the most challenging thing? Okay. I'm Black. I'm deaf. And third, I'm queer. Fourth, I have MS. That's 4 big things that make for one huge challenge for me to deal with every situation around me, everything. And I learned with all these 4 things, what could I do? I decided that's who I am. I had to accept who I am. And you have to genuinely love yourself first, all the way inside yourself, so that your self-love spreads to the world. That's my understanding, is becoming aware of who I am and accepting that. I grew up in some pretty heavy racial times with racial issues that were very significant, but I learned to deal with them. For example, one time I was invited to perform at some kind of a theater workshop or something in New Jersey. I think it was New Jersey. And it was a very white neighborhood. And I stayed at the guest home in this very white neighborhood. And it just so happened that in the kitchen in the guest home, I walked in, and all of a sudden there were 2 white people who came in, and they acted so shocked, and I automatically thought to myself, I had to stay calm. They came in and looked at me, and they started talking. And I said, I'm deaf. I tried to gesture that I'm deaf, and I gestured that we could write notes. And the guy was like confused, and I put paper and I said, put pen to paper and said, what's the problem? And they were officers. And they said the neighbors saw me coming in the building and they called the cops. And that's how the officers came in to the guest house. And when I saw those officers, I finally calmed down and told them to use paper. And I wrote down on a paper that I was staying at here to work at the university, and explained myself on paper. And the officers received that, and then they left. But when they left, I shook like a leaf. But when that happened, my energy tightened, and I had to say to myself, calm, be calm. Something that many other people might never experience, but in any situation I've learned, stay calm. That's the biggest solution I've found to that terrifying experience, and to others as well, and how to deal and cope with my 4 challenges in life.
Wow, such challenges. And I'm so glad that you stayed calm in that situation and just continued to move forward through that challenge. Wow, thank you for sharing with all of us. So, next we'll go ahead and go to Sarah. Like I mentioned before, I have a lot of identities. I'm a Native woman, I'm a mother, I'm deaf, multiple identities. And some of the challenges that I face is oppression and really systemic racism. There's a lot of issues here that are still prevalent. And even though we've broken a lot of barriers and overcome so much, we still have to stand strong and still continue fighting. And so I want to share with you all a story of something that happened to me about 2 years ago. It was in 2018, so it wasn't that long ago. This is a pretty recent story. Maybe some of you guys have heard, but let me tell you the story of what happened to me. I was recently imprisoned in 2018. The cops arrested me. They ignored my children. It was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The cops came in, and I was on the phone chatting away with a deaf friend. And then all of a sudden, I realized that there was like an alarm. And so I saw the lights flashing. I was like, what is this? And I realized it was welfare, the welfare office. And the cops said they were here. They wanted to do a check, and and I said, I need an interpreter. I need an interpreter. And they just kept insisting. And then they kept getting angry. And I could tell on their facial expressions that they were not being patient. They were not listening to me. And I don't know if it was because of my skin or if I'm a Native person. I felt like I was being stereotyped because we typically have the stereotype of alcoholism in our history. And I wasn't drunk and I was sober. I was able to communicate appropriately, I thought. I was communicating and I was trying to write back and forth with the officers requesting an interpreter, but it was such a difficult time. And I couldn't read what they were writing. It was so sloppy. And I just kept saying, please, please provide an interpreter. And so what ended up happening was the cops took me to jail, and my 2 kids were taken to shelters. And it was really all due to a communication loss. And it was such a dark, difficult situation for me. I really struggled for a while after, because I was sober. My kids, I didn't do anything. My kids didn't do anything. I love my kids. They mean more to me than anything in the whole world. And so having that, people look at me and now think that I'm a bad mother because of what happened. And wow, that situation with the cops, it was very hateful, the way that they were behaving towards me. And when I went into jail, when they arrested me, I didn't have any communication. No interpreters were provided. It was very confusing, no communication access whatsoever. And they gave me they didn't explain anything, but they were trying to provide an alcohol test for me. And they didn't even provide an alcohol test for me before they took me to jail. They just took me to jail and arrested my 2 children. Or they took my 2 children away. And I think it's just the systemic racism and part of our society, embedded in our society. And that's something that we have to survive and overcome. But that was a very serious situation for me. If I lost my kids, I don't think I would want to continue living without my kids. They mean so much to me. And after that situation, it became a dark time in my life, and it was hard to overcome. But one day I realized I have to stop feeling bad for myself. I have to stop. I've got to stand up. I've got to keep going. I have got to take a step forward, one step at a time. I have got to move on. And so that's what I did. I fought to get my kids back. I took one step at a time. I got treatment. I accepted help from people. I wasn't in denial anymore. I accepted help and I moved on. Because if you realize, a lot of people want to help you. And if you're open to it and you can receive that help, that will allow you to move forward if you receive that help. So I got help. I got my family back. I have friends. But you guys will see, if you have an experience like this, you guys will realize who your true friends are and who are not your true friends. Your true friends will come and stick by your side and help you and be there for you. I felt so overwhelmed at the time, but now that I got my kids back, now I have a job, now I own my own business. I mean, now I'm successful. And I hold a chair in my community for my Native community. I am trying not to tear down myself or my community. I don't want to give up. I do not want to give up. That's the main thing. You only live once. You only get one life to live. And you guys are capable of going far and doing far things. But you have to, use your experiences in life. Your experiences can help you as well. And you can, look, and other people can look at you and judge you, and you can see them, but you have to just grow through that like a plant. You just have to grow, continue growing and developing. And so again, now I stand tall because I have my kids and I have a smile on my face. And I'm happy now. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Such a huge challenge and so many challenges you've gotten. And I'm so glad you got your kids back. I feel like we've handled that question, and I appreciate everyone sharing their experiences. Let me turn it over to Joshua. I feel goosebumps, I'll tell you. I just feel really connected to all of you, and I hope the audience feels the same. I want to ask the next question, and maybe some of you has touched on this a bit already. The question is, have you noticed why deaf and hard of hearing people, including yourselves, have you noticed how they sometimes struggle or often struggle with identity? Are they deaf? Are they speech? Are they lip readers? Are they hard of hearing? All that kind of thing. Why do you think they struggle with that? And maybe a few examples would be useful. At the White House, they denied access for the disabled community, and deaf and hard of hearing struggled to pass a law. And there's lack of knowledge and technology. It used to be that we were all using TTYs and video phones, which were awkward perhaps, or knowledge in the family. For example, some of you mentioned having families with a hearing background, hearing families, non-deaf families, and then later learning how to sign, or others grew up signing. So what do you think is the reason that deaf people and hard of hearing people struggle with identity? Let me start with Christopher. Yeah, let me think. Well, wow. I feel at a loss. I think if the entire community, if the entire deaf community were to truly collaborate and support each other, it would help. Because the deaf community, related to access and unity, isn't entirely on the same page, but it's getting better. It's getting better. I feel like our support of one another as a community needs to be better. I don't know if I've answered your question. Joshua?
Yes, thank you. That gave me a lot to think about. Myself, as an example, my identity, like how I identify, I really have, I did not really have a lot of struggles with growing up, even though I did struggle to access communication. I was a visual learner, I was mainstreamed. And of course, there are different reasons and reasons why people may identify different ways, have different educational options, have different family lives, and different choices for who they socialize with. So I guess my question is really kind of behind that. What's your experience? Hopefully that helped clarify my question. But we can go ahead and switch over to Sarah if Sarah would like to answer. So when I was born, my family had no idea that I was deaf until I was about 8 months of age. So I had a hearing family, nobody knew sign language. And then they sent me to school when they did find out that I was deaf, where I could learn sign language. So ever since, they sent a teacher to my home before I entered school, because I did attend a residential school for the deaf. But they sent a teacher to my home so that I could learn sign language before entering school. So I learned PSE, and then I learned sign language, official ASL, and I was very lucky to have communication with my family at home. And I had a boyfriend who was deaf, and we had a good relationship and had a very good deaf community that I was close with. And when I attended college, I had a good community that I hung out with and supported each other through college. And so there wasn't a lot of interpreters. We didn't have a lot of hearing friends. But I really learned more about deaf culture and the deaf community because I went to a residential school for the deaf. And so I feel like that may have really helped that what I learned in that residential school for the deaf helped me apply that to entering into the hearing world and to learn how to communicate and use all those skills. And so I had some friends that did sign a little bit with me. They would try, but I really didn't want to have language barriers. I wanted, hi, this is my daughter. She's deaf. You want to say hi? So the hearing world is very, very different than experiencing what I did at school. There was a lot of support in the community that I went to school in and the groups that I hung out with. And that's very different compared to the hearing world where I really struggled. And they really did emphasize ASL as American Sign Language. And there's two different types of, communication. There's official ASL, and then there was more of like a native sign language that was two different ways to access communication. And so I really struggled. So when I grew up in Iowa, I really struggled with not having access to interpreters and to access education that wasn't through the school for the deaf. I struggled with not having captions. And so our deaf community actually did sue a couple of times for not having access. And they would just keep saying, oh, we forgot, or we forgot to get the interpreter, we forgot to caption that. But they really just didn't care. to provide that access to communication. And so it's really important that we vote in November. And so I'm really telling all of my friends and really reminding everybody that it's very important to vote in November. Okay, yeah, so there are several. So let's go ahead and go to Richard for our next panelist. So I identify as deaf. I was born to deaf parents. And I didn't really have a lot of communication issues after I moved here from Romania. I did grow up here and I was mainstreamed. And from Romania, they had a different type of government that was capitalism, and it was just very different than the United States. Communism, excuse me. And so when I attended school here in the United States, they had total communication, where it was kind of like a simultaneous communication method that they wanted to use. So when I entered school, they did speech therapy for me. They wanted me to learn to speak and sign at the same time. And they called that total communication. So for me, it was something new to learn from what I had just communicated at home with my parents. So somebody had mentioned the White House and recently how they blocked accessibility for deaf and hard of hearing people, but then they finally were able to get access. So I can understand that, having all of those barriers and being blocked access, because we're such a small minority. The deaf community is a small community, and that's how I identify. I identify with C-sign or oral or ASL. It doesn't matter what communication method, we all identify together. And I really think that people need to have an open mind and work together and build community as deaf and hard of hearing individuals, so that we can help remove some of those barriers and make it better. It's a long way to go that we have, but it's 2020 and we're supposed to have access, but we have to keep working on it. And so they did sue and we did win to get that access recently. Thank you, Richard. That was a very different experience that you went through growing up and moving here. And so seeing two different types of communities. The next panelist will be Danielle, Danny. Oh, where do I start? Okay, something just came into my head. So I do identify as deaf, and my parents sign. When I was born deaf, but they didn't find out until I was the age of 3. My dad worked, and that's with a friend, and that's actually how they found out that I was deaf. And my parents really did grieve when they found out I was deaf. It was a very hard experience for them. They weren't necessarily like happy. It was kind of mixed emotions. He had a deaf friend who was kind of like, oh, we can, learn sign language. We can do all of this. And it was just kind of overwhelming for my parents, but they did learn sign. And the first sign that they learned was pizza. And so this is the sign that they would do. And I also loved cereal, Cheerios. So I would sign Cheerios. So it was minimal communication, but we did sign. We did start signing at an early age. And then I went to a deaf and hard of hearing school where I learned official sign language. So as I mentioned before, I was sick a lot, in and out of the hospitals with heart issues. And so part of how I identify as a sick person or not healthy. Um, and so sometimes I have communication barriers, but it wasn't really that I identified as deaf until I was like a teenager. When I wanted to start dating and going out with boys and hanging out and, being a teen, that was a barrier for me, was communication, having communications with boys. Some things were getting lost in communication. And so I just didn't feel like I was on an equal playing field with my peers because of that communication barrier. So I started thinking about it, and I thought maybe I would get a cochlear implant. I thought my dad would be happy for me that I got a cochlear implant because I'd be able to, communicate and socialize with my friends and kind of fit into that community. But he was really heartbroken. He was like crying when I told him. And I was like, Dad, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to get a cochlear implant. He's like, don't you love yourself? Don't you identify as deaf? And I was like, well, no. And so it was very interesting. My family almost identified me as deaf before I did. And then finally, when I was willing to go and take a hearing test and to see if I would qualify for a cochlear implant, I wasn't a good candidate. And so that was hard for me to experience and kind of process that, because I really wanted to socialize with my hearing friends. I wanted to date hearing boys. I wanted to be like a, quote unquote normal teen. I wanted to go to dances and, I was, wanted to be an actress. And I just felt like this was a lot of barriers that I was facing. And I thought the cochlear implant could solve that. So I started to really accept my deaf identity after that, after when I was a teen, and really became immersed in different opportunities within the deaf community. I learned sign language. And when I attended high school, I took like a class. It was like a deaf and hard of hearing class. I was mainstream, but we used sign language. And I felt like I was not in the appropriate math class. Like I needed to be in a higher level of math class. I felt like I was in a basic class. And when I asked, they were like, no, you can't enter that class. And I was naive at the time. I didn't really understand. But I thought about it. And over time, it didn't really hit me until later. But they were discriminating against me. But why couldn't I go into that advanced class just because I was deaf? Like I'm deaf, but I could still enter that class. So that was one time that I felt that I was discriminated against. Another story was when I was pregnant. When my mom was pregnant at the time. And so when I came home, I told my mom that they wouldn't let me into that advanced math class. My mom was so upset. So they attended an IEP meeting. And that's when it hit me. And I really understood that they were saying that I couldn't do that because I was deaf. And I hated it. I hated being deaf. I hated the identity of being deaf. I didn't want it anymore. And I really thought it was a negative thing. I wasn't proud of being deaf. I really just kind of thought it was a bad thing. But my dad really encouraged me and helped me to really accept my identity of being deaf, even though I really kind of struggled with it and hated myself for that. I wished that I was normal. I wished that I was tired of going to IEPs. I had had years of IEPs and meetings and discussions, and I felt like I already had proof that I was able to learn. I had good grades. But as I continued to go through school, it wasn't until I attended college at California State University, Northridge, that I really started to grow into my deaf identity. At that time, I joined for the Miss Deaf CSUN, and thank God that I did, because I really became immersed with the deaf community and in my deaf identity. I was meeting deaf people, and that really changed my outlook and who I am today of becoming a deaf adult, because I immersed myself with the deaf community. So before I had mixed emotions, but I overcame that, and now I love myself and I'm deaf and proud.
Thank you for sharing with us, Danny. And next, let's see, our last person is Everett, right? I get what my deaf colleagues have mentioned and their journey from birth to the present day and how they've identified themselves and how I have identified myself and how I became more rooted in my community. I feel how you have is how I feel, very much the same. I have a strong belief that environment has a huge impact on development of one's identity. If if you were born in a and raised in a community or in a family where people don't understand deaf people and don't have any access, they didn't know any deaf people, you might very well think I have to be like them, the ones who are not like me, because being like others is a successful thing for most people. We need to stop that. I remember I did. As Danny said, I wished that I wasn't deaf. And the reason I wished I wasn't deaf was I wanted to stop how they treated me. Once I realized that, I was intrigued by the fact that I was willing to give up who I was because I didn't want to be different. Once I realized that, it changed my perspective. It was a slow process. I don't know precisely when, but it's an evolving process. But it's important to understand that it's okay to be different. It's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be deaf. And sometimes you have to find a different family, as it were, a different environment to connect to continue to grow. By that, I don't mean you completely discard the other people in your life that were already in your life. I think balance is incredibly important as well. If you're in the wrong kind of environment, you need to find some balance if you possibly can, so that you can believe in yourself. It's important to see deaf models. I remember I so wished that I could meet deaf models to show me who they were. If I'd had that, that would have helped me so much. As I look back on my life, I felt so alone. I didn't have enough role models to see that deaf people could do things. I saw so many hearing adults, but they didn't show me who I could be. And as I sought out models, I finally found some, and that helped a lot too. I found out there were deaf professors and deaf people doing other important things. And as I discovered more and more about my community, I felt better and better. And now I don't question my identity, but I'm still growing stronger and stronger and more solidly and more rootedly into my being. And all of us will do that throughout our lives. I'm so grateful that the possibilities are great, that a deaf person can function in both worlds. Even if it feels oppressive, even if it's painful to navigate, it's important to believe in yourself. It's really important to remember that who you are is important, and to continue to persevere for your own personal success as well. Of course, there will be oppression. Of course, there will be struggle. This is a standard thing that will happen, but we must believe in ourselves. Thank you very much. I'll wrap it up with that.
That's such a wonderful story. Thank you, Everett, for sharing.
Mhm.
Something that comes to mind that I want to just share with everybody was from Sarah's story. Sarah let us know that she had to take off. She had to leave. So I just wanted to let you guys know that she has left the panel. But now we can go ahead and take it to Crystal. Well, thank you, Joshua. And yes, Sarah had to leave, but we're so grateful that she was able to participate and share her stories and the struggles with us before she left. And I feel like there's many of us that have the same experiences, the same struggles. We're growing up and experiencing the same types of things. So the next question I'd like to ask is, if you had an opportunity to make a change and make an improvement for your deaf or hard of hearing community in your local community, what would it be? Let's go ahead and start with Everett. All right. Wow. I guess I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. Let's see. Changes. Looking back on my personal experience and my perspective of how I didn't like being treated all of those years by the hearing people, would be really early language acquisition for deaf children. So they could pick up and learn sign language at an early age and be exposed to sign language and really get a strong foundation, because that really makes so many deaf people successful and opens up a lot of opportunities, having that foundation, not having that language deprivation, struggling to figure out who they are. If they figure out early on at the beginning that they are able to learn the difference between speaking and sign language and just language in general, if they have a strong foundation, and maybe if ASL was more popular, teachers would use it more, people would pick it up, and ASL would be more common. I think that's a change. That's a perspective that I see. Just having different exposures to it on TV and in movies, having the deaf community exposed. And like Gallaudet, the university is sending out so much information recently. But one thing that's very interesting that I've noticed that still is happening, even though we are getting more prevalent and getting more popular, something that's interesting is that only hearing babies they think that it's worth teaching ASL to. Like hearing babies, all these hearing parents think, I'm going to benefit and teach my child sign language. And they're going to be so successful because they're going to learn language and they can pick up sign language before they can learn to speak. But the deaf community is not picking up the same popular trend. It's almost opposite. If you have a deaf baby, they are really looking at it more of like a medical perspective of like, don't sign, you should, teach them oralism and do surgery and fix it. But the hearing community is really wanting to teach all the hearing babies sign language. So I feel like they want to prevent and not allow deaf children to learn that sign language, which I just think is really ironic, because it does so much damage, even though they're young. Sometimes children are 10 or 12 before they start getting really strong language acquisition. And so I think that having that long time, that delay until they're 10 or 12 or entering school age, I feel like they've already lost that opportunity to have that strong foundation compared to other deaf children that are born into deaf families and learn sign language immediately. They learn that they have that strong language foundation, and then they are able to develop language much better. Whether they sign or they learn to speak later, they have that foundation, which helps make them successful. That's the key, is having a foundation of language, having a strong foundation. So for babies to feel comfortable, to be able to communicate and have that confidence, that's something that I don't think that should be taken away from deaf babies. And it's weird though, they try to kind of hold the sign language exposure off from deaf babies, whereas they do expose hearing babies to it. There's a lot of studies out there talking about early language acquisition and having a strong foundation. And I think it's great that hearing babies are learning ASL. I really do, that parents are learning sign and they're supporting their babies. That's great, but we need to have that same opportunity for our deaf babies. It's so important. It's twice as important. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have it, but we really need to share language with our deaf babies so that they can have strong communication and have that foundation for strong communication for later in life. So that would be my change.
Wow. And what a strong and important thing to say for equality of access. Now, Christopher. Okay, let me start again. With babies who are deaf, starting as babies, that would not match my upbringing. There was a lot of damage growing up for me because I was raised orally. To speak and lip read was what I was taught to do. And then finally, I understood deaf culture and the deaf language and all that at truly the age of 50. Now I'm 56. So I had to accept who I am. All the negativity, I wish, the regrets and so forth, those regrets, I've had to really learn how to cope with those and put them aside and instead accept that's who I am. And I've had to change my way of thinking, not to be so negative. To not allow the distress over my old life bother me. I've had to reevaluate my life as an adult and all that negativity. I finally learned to understand deaf culture at 50. I went to college. I took culture and language classes. I learned so much. What I'm saying is that I've had to accept that that has been my journey. And I can share it with children, that it's okay to make mistakes. But I hope you won't go through what I went through. I hope their parents don't make the same mistakes. What I mean is I have to accept who I am and that what I am and who I am is okay. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Christopher. Wow. That journey is not easy, right? So thank you for sharing. Now we'll go ahead and go to Danielle. Oh, I have a huge list of changes I would make, but I'll try to keep it short. But again, I was mainstreamed into when I was growing up. And to be honest, I liked that. I'm sorry, I was not mainstreamed. And I really liked that the teachers were deaf and they signed. I felt like I could really understand the content and the curriculum that was being taught to me. I have a friend who's a teacher, and I love that friend. I really support her. She supports the deaf community. But compared to other friends who are DHH teachers and the exposure that they have on the children, even if they don't go to a deaf school, at least they have role models. And I think that's key, is having sign language and having role models in mainstream settings. And even though I might not have had all of those opportunities because I was also raised orally and mainstreamed, I have the two different worlds that I kind of live in, the deaf world and the hearing world, kind of like what Everett was mentioning. When I sign, I feel like I'm really loud. But my point is that they usually know who's talking. It's very visual and you can tell who's talking. But when I did speech therapy, I was really motivated to learn to speak. But then I wasn't signing as much. And I was really, really motivated to, learn speech. And so I felt like a struggle, whether I was trying to fit into the hearing world or the deaf world while being mainstreamed. And when I wanted that cochlear implant, I feel like you wouldn't need it at all in the deaf world. You could just take it off. Even if I had it now, I probably wouldn't use it. I would probably take it off. For my culture and for my community, some of the resources that I see that we need is language access for Spanish for our deaf community. I feel like for the Hispanic community, there's not enough language access. So there's 3 languages that they're struggling with: English, sign language, and then Spanish. And so I have been trying to show my daughter that there are multiple ways of communicating, and we have to make sure that we're, getting involved and having that equal communication for all people. And so I really look up to my mom, because my mom is the one that installed that to me, that taught me English and taught me ASL. But then for Spanish, I mean, I didn't really learn it at the time, but I am taking a class now. I've been taking a class for 4 years, and I'm really proud to, communicate. And I can I can write and communicate in 3 different languages now. And so I don't think that we have to really just focus on English and just focus on ASL. If the culture and the parents are speaking Spanish, I think that we should support that community as well and provide access and resources in that language for them. So I think that is one thing I would provide or change.
Thank you. Wow. Yep. These things change. We're getting close to the end of our time. So let me hand it over to Joshua. Hi, thank you, Crystal. Hello. I know I'm sorry to cut off more of our panel's participation, but I want to start the questions that have been coming forth from the audience. We've been receiving a number of questions, in fact, 2 questions. And the first question is, in your work, life, if you didn't have a job that you now have, what would you do? What would you do if you didn't have this job? Or if you were laid off or fired? Again, to clarify, I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mind clarifying? I don't want to be talking off point. I'll go back to Joshua. No problem. I'm happy to repeat. The audience question for y'all was, if your present work did not exist, what would you do instead of that? So if you didn't have the job you now have, if it never existed, what would you do, Christopher? Did that make sense? If I didn't have a job, if I didn't have any kind of a job, I'd go back to school. I would, to keep my mind calm, rather than, oh no, I have no work, I have no job. It would make me crazy. I'd go back to school. That's my 2 cents worth. Joshua, Crystal, whoever.
Thank you, Christopher. Anybody else from the panel? Would you like to respond to this question? Great, Danny. So if I was not doing the current job that I have right now, I would travel the world. I would go to other countries. I would meet with deaf people and see what their struggles are and see how they could be supported because, here in America, we have a lot of successes. But I think that one thing I would like to do is really just see other communities and other societies and support other people in other countries, and you can see different cultures. I love to travel and see different languages, different cultures, maybe France, maybe Romania. And there's so many places that I would rather go. So why not meet people and socialize and enjoy not having a job? And I wouldn't wait. I would just go ahead and do it. That's what I would do.
Yes, I agree. That was a good question. And it was from our audience. And now I want to move on to the second question. Anybody who'd like can volunteer to answer. Okay, the second question. A deaf person, if you were to tell us, if you were asked who would be a very good deaf role model, who would you select as an excellent deaf role model for young deaf people? Who would like to answer that tough question? Christopher's got his hand up. Who would I like for people to, who do I look up to? My number one role model? Ella Lentz. She's my role model. I look up to her. She has inspired me in so many things. She's given me a sense that I can succeed. I respect her so much. Ella Lentz. That's who I would say. Back to you, Joshua.
Thank you. Yes, Ella is very well known in the deaf community, of course. Anyone else like to respond to this question? Final thoughts or words, Everett? Great. So for looking up for a deaf role model, I think there are a few, but if I had to pick one, I would say Niall DeMarco. Niall DeMarco. And the reason is because he came to the residential school for the deaf and gave a speech while on stage, talked to everyone, and visited with all the students. And he really connected well with the students. He's a great supporter of the deaf community. Deaf people look up to him. And I feel really inspired by his successes. And I believe that other people are as well. So I love Niall. So I definitely look up to him currently. He also represents my perspective as well as his own.
Well, I would like to throw my vote in for an excellent role model for deaf youth and children. I would have to say Niall as well. Not because of his incredible fame and all that, but because of his involvement with language deprivation and his discussions regarding his own life experience when he was 5, from his infancy until he was 5. I think that's a perfect role model for deaf young people. And again, some people say, oh, Niall, not Niall again. Well, of course, Niall, but he's young. He's motivated, he's excited, he's enthusiastic, he invests in the community of education of kids from K through 12. And maybe Crystal has one last thing to say. My role model is my husband. He is deaf and he's been through so much. and he succeeded. And that's why I admire him so much. And that's why I look up to him and perceive him as a good role model. Back to Joshua.
I just want to thank everybody for participating and attending today. I feel like we've all learned so much from the panelists, and hopefully the audience that's on YouTube is ready to roll up their sleeves and get out and give back to the community, the deaf community. Crystal, do you have any last words for everyone? So our time has unfortunately ran out, but I want to thank everybody, the deaf people who have joined our panel for this discussion today to help this event be possible. So such a very important exposure for the community and the audience to be a part of. And also I wanted to thank the interpreters today for helping everybody who does not have access to sign language because they don't know sign language. And also, lastly, I'd like to thank our technology team who worked hard to prepare and make this event seamless. Ooh, the technology, that is not an easy job, right? The last thing is Joshua has been working with me and to make this event happen. So I wanted to thank you, Joshua. And do you have any last comments before we end? Joshua?
Yes. I wanted to add one more thing. The panel can leave as you need to and turn off your cameras. I want to thank you again for your participation, and I hope to see you in the near future. I certainly look forward to seeing you around. Ciao, bye-bye. Bye-bye, thank you. Well, we're finished, and we hope you've enjoyed watching us today. And please share the information that we shared today with others. I hope you'll join us next year for Deaf Awareness Week. Thank you and goodbye. Enjoy your weekend. Have a good evening and take care. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Mhm.